When many people think of catching the walleye of a lifetime, they think of one place at one time of year, and that's the Fox River in DePere, Wisconsin. Spring fishing for big trophy walleye below the DePere Dam can be fantastic, but there are a few things that make a huge difference between a poor day of fishing and a trip you'll never forget. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. As you can see, today I'm not on the water, but instead I'm in my college dorm room. The water on the river is still just a little bit too cold for those fish to be in full pre-spawn spawning mode activity, but fingers crossed that they should be by this weekend or early next week, so I can get out there and catch some fish and hopefully get it on film for you guys. That video would be coming out next Friday, so stay tuned for the channel for that. But nevertheless, today's video, as you saw by the title, we're going to be going over some of my best tips from me to you guys that are going to help you catch more walleyes on the Fox River starting this spring. So without further ado, let's get right into it with tip number one. All right, guys, so tip number one is to fish the current seams and not just all of the water below the dam. When a lot of people come to the DePere Dam and they come fish from shore, they just cast straight out or they just cast randomly at the water. But that's not exactly where the fish always are. But what's actually going on beneath the surface is the fish are not sitting in the fast water, because if they were, they're expending way too much energy that there's put towards spawning and towards egg production and gonad production at this time of year. And so they're not in the fast water, but in that dead, not moving water, there's no food and there's no oxygen, so they're not going to sit there either. You got to find that sweet spot sort of between that fast and slow water, and that's where those fish are going to be. So what do you look for? Like, what is a current seam? It's actually, you can see it visually. It's a line on the water where you can see there's fast water and then there's slow water. Oftentimes there'll be foam or debris forming kind of a line along it that'll help you see it easier. There might even be like a slight ripple on the surface, but once you get good at reading water and once you learn the river a little bit, you'll be able to see them no problem. But how do you fish it? What you want to do is you want to cast a little bit upstream and just let your jig kind of naturally drift right on the edge of that seam. You want to keep bottom contact. Those fish are going to be sitting there and they're going to see your jig kind of floating by. They're going to jump out, grab it quick, and go back and sit in that like slightly slower moving water. So the fish aren't going to be sitting right in the chaotic, crazy fast water. They're going to be sitting right next to it, waiting for your bait to go by. So if you can find the current seams, you're going to find more fish this spring. All right, guys, tip number two is you got to have the right timing when you're fishing. It matters more than your spot, actually. The fish are coming into the river to spawn, not to feed. So if you can maximize your time on the water and fish at the right time of day, you're going to catch more fish. The best times for these walleyes is kind of the low light, sunrise, sunset times. If you can't get out at the low light periods, if you can get out on a cloudy or windy day, the clouds kind of help to minimize the sun impact. It extends your bite window, gives you more time of the low light period. Also, wind produces the waves and it helps break up light penetration into the water. It also pushes bait fish up when there's wind, because the bait fish are pushed physically by the wind and the waves, but also the wind pushes the food source of the bait fish, all the zooplankton. The bait fish follow that, and in turn, the walleyes will follow the bait fish. So also, sometimes snowmelt and runoff will create a dirtier water that also limit the light penetration, gives you a better daytime bite, because their walleyes are very sensitive to light, and you're fishing such shallow water beneath this dam. Light penetration is key. On those bright, calm days, it's super sunny, and the fish will just kind of be spooky. They'll be a little more lockjaw. But to adjust for this lockjaw stuff, if you're fishing in the midday, you want to kind of fish deeper, slower water. Those fish they're not going to want to sit up high in the water column, or they're not going to sit shallow. They're going to move off into that deeper water where there's less light. They feel more comfortable. They feel safer. But then in the evenings, they're going to move onto those shelves, move up shallower, not only to spawn, but to feed as well. They're going to get more aggressive with how they eat, and you're going to catch more fish. Tip number three. This tip is kind of more situated towards boat anglers, but it's more of a technique, and that's vertical jigging. It's one of the most popular and most effective ways to catch walleyes under the dam. Like I said, it's boat angler more specific, but you can probably do it in certain spots from shore, especially by Voyager Park. They got that wall there. It's a little, that's probably the only spot you can do it from shore. So this is more boat anglers. But anyways, for the gear, you're going to want to use a very light jig if possible. So if you're in some lighter current, you might want to use like 1/4 ounce. If you're in the heavier current or like the deeper water, like midday stuff, like I was just talking about, you might have to use up to a ½ ounce just so you can maintain that bottom contact, feel the bottom. For line, what you're going to want is braid, but you also might want a fluorocarbon leader because this is kind of more sensitive. The bait's going to spend more time in front of the fish. They're going to have more time to inspect it and look for anything that's unnatural. So if those fish see your line, they're not going to bite it. I guess if you're technically saying if you're doing it right, your jig is going to go down, you're going to tap the bottom, and you're just going to lift it slightly. You don't want to be big, huge rips all the time. Sometimes you do. Every situation is different. But you're going to do just kind of a slight lift and drop it down to the bottom and just repeat that over and over, trying to keep your line as vertical as possible. When your bait hits the bottom, you're going to kind of feel like a tick, tick, tick. It's just going to be like you want to feel the bottom contact every time you go down. Some big mistakes people make doing this, I see them all the time, is having too much slack in your line when you go down. What happens is you get too much slack or you're going too fast down. You create that slack, the fish hit it, but you can't feel because you got slack, and then they're going to drop it because they can feel the hooks. They know it's not a real piece of food. They drop it, and you just keep jigging because you never felt it, and you miss all those fish. Also, another mistake is using a jig that's too heavy. It sinks too fast, hits the bottom way too hard, and it looks unnatural. And those fish, they've seen all kinds of baits. They're not biting it if it doesn't look natural. And finally, one last mistake is kind of lifting it too high. You don't want to lift it 4 feet off the bottom if there's no fish 4 feet off the bottom. A lot of these walleyes are kind of cruising the bottom, foot and a half off. So you just want to lift it up 2 feet off bottom maybe, just enough to where they can see it and chase it down to the bottom, pin it down and eat it. So keep your bait close to the bottom. And if you're not hitting the bottom, you're not in the strike zone, you're not going to catch these fish. Tip number 4 is all about what kind of bait you want to use. It all depends on the water temperature. In the very early spring, when the water is still super cold like it is probably today and it will be for the next couple of days, you might want to try it using live bait if possible. You want to use like fathead minnows, shiners, night crawlers, and these work in the super cold water because they have the natural scent and they have like a slow natural movement compared to some plastics, hair jigs, or baits like something like this, hard baits. But as the water warms up, these fish are going to get more and more aggressive as they kind of move in shallower, as their body starts to get ready for summer. And that's when your plastics are going to get deadly, like your paddle tails, your ringworms, flukes, just a classic plastic bait that you might use. If neither is really working, try using both. It sounds weird, but put a paddle tail on and tip it with a minnow. That gives you that scent, and it gives you kind of the more erratic motion of a plastic. So if they're not going to hit your plastic straight up, add a little bit of meat. And if they're not going to hit the meat straight up, just speed up your presentation a little bit. The fish might be more aggressive as the water warms up. You just got to kind of play around with things, see what kind of mood the fish are in, and go from there. Tip number 5. Now this is a super crucial one for a lot of river presentations, but especially in the springtime. The Fox River changes constantly, daily, hourly in spring, sometimes even down to the minute. I've seen it where I can see the line of dirty water coming down from where it goes clear to dirty. So how do you fish these different water clarities? Well, in the dirty water, the fish are going to rely a lot more on vibration, contrast, and sound. So what you want to do is you want to kind of sometimes use lighter colors, chartreuse, orange, pink. Sometimes you might want to use a black because the black always stands out. Black's always a go-to color. If you want to get a bigger presentation, they get a bit better profile. They can see it from farther. They can see it easier. That'll also be helpful. Sometimes rattles, the fish can hear it. They can kind of key into where the bait is. They can find it easier. So that's for dirty water. For clear water, the fish are going to rely a lot more on their sight. Although they're usually seeing walleyes as night predators in the daytime, they will hit. They do have fantastic eyesight. So in clear water conditions, you're going to want to use natural colors. Start with those whites, those silvers, those greens, kind of mimic a goby. So not a green like this, kind of more like a moss green, or a green pumpkin is a good one for the bass fishermen out there. Also with this clear water, you're going to want to use lighter line and a fluorocarbon leader just to help minimize what those fish are seeing. Like I said, the river can change overnight, so you're going to have to be very open to changing your presentation on the water. Got to match your bait to the water. You can't always just fish with your confidence bait. I find myself doing that. But you have to be willing to change your setup and change your presentation. That's how you're going to adjust to the fish and catch more this spring. All right, for tip number 6, I'm going to kind of talk about a little bit for shore and boat anglers. So shore anglers, you guys like me, actually sometimes have a huge advantage if you fish it right. You're going to want to kind of fish the edges, the rock edges, eddies behind structure or behind rocks. You're going to try and find slower current seams that you can see from shore that the boat anglers might not be able to access. And to fish these, you're going to want to kind of cast upstream at an angle, let your jig naturally sweep downstream, bounce it on the bottom, and you want to keep that bottom contact. And those fish are going to hit it as it bounces downstream, and that's when you're going to catch fish. Now for boat anglers, what you want to do is kind of like I talked about before, you're going to want a vertical jig. That's a huge boat angler advantage. So you want to use your trolling motor to help hold your position, kind of stay in the same area, vertically jig under the boat. And if you're feeling crazy, you're going to kind of want to follow your contour edges, kind of see what depth the fish are in. And boat control is oftentimes just as important as your bait choice. So if you can keep your boat under control, keep your bait in the strike zone, that's how you're going to catch fish this spring. Tip number 7, and I'm going to warn you guys, this is probably the biggest mistake I see people making out there, is slow down. It's springtime, it's cold water, the fish are sluggish, they have a slow metabolism, they don't want to chase their super hyper aggressive presentations, they're not going to chase it very far. So what does slowing down actually mean? It means using small jig movements, little jigs, small pops, longer pauses, slowing down your drift. What you want to do is instead of thinking like snap, 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 you kind of want to think lift and pause, let your bait kind of pendulum down, sit on the bottom, lift it up, pendulum down, slow it down. Oftentimes, if you think you're fishing slow enough, you actually want to slow down another gear. Keep slowing down. Those fish are not chasing. It's cold water, slow metabolism. And like I said before, they're not in the river to eat. They're in the river to spawn. Eating is just a bonus. So keep slowing down and you're going to catch more fish. Tip number 8. This one kind of goes with the last one about slowing down, but it goes more with your actual bait itself. You want to make sure you're using the right weight on your jig. If your bait is too light, you're going to kind of lose control. The current's going to blow your bait out. It's not going to be in the right spot. Your line's not going to stay straight and tight. Also, you're going to lose your bottom, you're going to lose your bottom contact, and you might not even be able to feel when your bait hits the bottom. On the contrary, if you go too heavy, I said it before, your bait's going to just pound into the bottom. It's going to look unnatural. On top of that, it's going to bury itself in the rocks. You're going to get snagged. If you're fishing from shore, it's not going to bounce downstream naturally, and it's just not going to look natural. You're not going to get any bites. So kind of a general rule of thumb for this is you want to use the lightest jig possible that's still going to make bottom contact where you can still feel it kind of tick in the bottom without burying itself in the mud and the rocks and without being an unnatural presentation. Right, tip number 9 for you guys is that the fish are constantly moving and you have to follow them. It's the spring, which means it's a spawning run, which means the fish are not always looking for food, but they're going to be completely roaming in search of a mate or 2 or 3 or 4, depending on, I don't know, fish kind of get crazy like that. Obviously, as a boat angler, you'll be more mobile than a shore angler because you can kind of move around way easier. Shore anglers, the shore gets lined and can't always find a spot, but on a on a colder or non-busy day on shore, there's not as many anglers. If you can move around and stay mobile and try new areas, new current seams, new water, it's going to help you catch more fish. You're going to help you find the fish. And once you find them, usually you can at least catch a couple. So whether you're in a boat or on your shore, don't wait for the fish, go find them, and then you catch them from there. So you'll get a few more this spring. All right, my final tip for the day, tip number 10, is to fish slightly upstream. And that sounds funny, but let me explain. When a lot of people are fishing, they cast straight out or sometimes even downstream, and that just kills the presentation because what it does is that your jig starts to drag unnaturally on the bottom. It doesn't look right. You lose your bottom contact, and your bait will move too quickly through the strike zone. So how do you fix it? What you want to do is cast about 30 to 45 degree angle upstream and just let the current carry your bait downstream. And that'll allow it to have a supernatural presentation that the fish are looking for. Another key is to follow your bait with your rod tip as it floats downstream. You don't want your rod to be facing upstream if your bait's downstream because you're going to lose a lot of feel and it's going to make your bait actually look more unnatural. So why does this work so well, especially in the Fox River? The biggest part is it allows your bait to flow naturally with the current as a normal bait fish would. It also keeps you jigging the strike zone longer as it drifts downriver, and it gives you a better feel for bites if you can keep your rod following your bait and keep a direct contact in a straight line between your rod tip and your bait. One little pro detail is most bites are going to happen when your jig kind of swings in front of or into the current seam, like I talked about in tip 1, or into the slower water pocket where those fish are kind of stacked up waiting to ambush. Your angle of your cast controls everything, and if your cast is wrong, nothing else matters. You're not going to have the feel, and your bait's going to look unnatural. You're not going to get any bites. So when you're fishing out there, make sure you're doing a 30 to 45 degree angle upstream to allow your bait to go natural, and you'll get more bites this spring. All right, guys, that wraps up this video with my 10 spring walleye fishing tips on the Fox River. If you're going to be fishing the DePere area this spring, drop a comment. Let me know if you're fishing from shore or a boat. If you want more videos like this, please make sure to subscribe. I love to post these tip videos. I'm going to post more videos of me fishing soon, so stay tuned for that. All the time on this channel, I like to post fishing content along with those tips to help you catch more fish. So if you're into that, make sure to stick around to the channel. I try to post weekly videos every Friday. Be ready for some more fishing content out on the river in the next coming weeks. But that's all I got for you guys today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.